You must love podcasts if you're listening to this. Do you want to start your own one or you already have one? Then follow Smarter Podcasting to get expert advice from me, Niall Mackay, the podcast guy. Since 2019, we've worked with over 40 podcasters, produced over 700 episodes, and helped many podcasts get to the top of the Apple Podcast charts. And right now, I'm offering you a professional edit for just $27. Click the link in the show notes. You're the person that's going to guide the listener through the podcast. And so you need to tell the listeners why you are the guide, what qualifies you to be the person that's going to take them through this journey. It's something that you've done, you've noticed the changes, it's had a profound impact on your life.
This has been so valuable. Thank you so much. We're going to have a conversation offline. I hope that we can work together as well, because this has been really valuable.
Welcome to another audit episode of Smarter Podcasting with me, your host, Niall Mackay. I started my first podcast in 2019 as a hobby, like many people did. I started it in my front room with a terrible condenser Blue Yeti microphone, but it was so much fun and I learned so much. I learned so much to the point that I started my own business, 7 Million Bikes Podcasts, that makes podcasts for people around the world. And we've now made over 50 podcasts. We've produced over 700 episodes and we've helped several podcasts get to the top of the Apple Podcast charts. So now I help other podcasters make the best podcast possible. On this show, we talk to industry experts like Sam Sethi, Adam Shively, and even amazing podcasters like Jordan Harbinger. And I also do podcast edits. And so today I'm going to be talking to a podcaster who has given up alcohol 2 years ago, which is incredible. And she has created her own podcast to help other people who also want to reduce their alcohol intake. My guest today is Michelle O'Brien. Michelle, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to see what you've uncovered.
So we're going to get into today's audit. So we always start with the same questions. So Michelle, what equipment do you record with?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I have two places that I record in. So I use a podcast studio called Podster in Singapore, and they are absolutely amazing. They have 6 sets, 4 studios. You pay by the hour. You walk in, they have a 3-camera setup. Your mics are already set up, and they have a videographer in the room, and they capture your conversation and send you all of the files at the end of the day. It is absolutely amazing. I know the cameras are Sony. I couldn't tell you what, and I'm not 100% sure what the mics are. So sorry on that one.
No, but that's amazing. You don't need to know the equipment.
Okay, the second podcast that I do, I record at home. Now, this is where I'm going to be quite embarrassed in sharing this. So when I record the podcast at home, this is usually with people who are not based in Singapore, so anywhere around the world. And I use Riverside to do the filming and recording. But I haven't been using any equipment. So I've actually just been using the camera and the microphone from my MacBook, which is, I know. And you know what's really bad? I've got Rode mics. I just haven't figured out how to use them. And it just stresses me out every time I try.
Okay, well, we're going to fix that because you see my face. My biggest problem in the world is people using the laptop microphone because it is the worst. And I remember one of my first episodes, I guess I just hadn't connected the microphone properly, or I hadn't selected it, something like that. We did the whole episode, and then and this was like a MacBook 2010, MacBook Pro 2010, shows how old I am. And the quality was just absolutely terrible. And generally, yeah, you can tell right away. And we will get into that. The fact that you have Rode microphones pains me, but we're going to fix that today. And I didn't realize you had another podcast. I know Podster, and I think we both know Charlotte Lewis West, who's also based in Singapore, and we do work together. Podster looks like an incredible setup, and we don't have anything like that here in Saigon. And it's something that, don't tell anyone that we're looking at maybe doing something similar here. But tell me a little bit about the first podcast, because I didn't actually listen to that at all. And I assume if it's done with Podster, it's amazing.
Oh, it's the same podcast. So it's just some episodes are shot in Podster when I've got the person who's based in Singapore. And then if they're not based in Singapore, I just do it at home from my laptop. So depending on which episode you reviewed and you looked at, If it was the one done in Podster, the sound quality was probably amazing. If it was one that I was done at home, it was probably appalling. So you'll have to tell me which episode that you looked at, and I can tell you where it was shot.
I always do the latest episode, which was just published on August 27th, which was done at home. And thank God, because if it had been the one at Podster, this would have been the shortest audit ever, probably because there wouldn't have been anything really to tell you. But yeah, so that's really exciting. I'm going to go back now and look at the one from Podster, which that's incredible that you have access to that. Okay, so we've got that covered. You've mentioned you use Riverside. How do you do your editing after you've recorded?
Okay, so I have a full-time video editor working in Philippines for me. She is absolutely amazing. And so I will send her over the raw files. Do you want me to tell you a little bit about the process or just who's doing the editing?
So you can give us the brief process. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So what happens is she'll do a first cut, and then she'll send me like a first cut and the transcript. So I'll listen whilst kind of going through the transcript. As I go through the transcript, I'm kind of highlighting or removing any pieces, or I'm highlighting any parts of the conversation that are going to work really well for shorts or for quotes. And then I kind of send that back. She'll kind of do that final pass on the editing, maybe even in some cases clean up the sound. And I think the most recent one, if it was the Amanda Giles episode, it wasn't great because there was a massive thunderstorm happening in Singapore at that time as well. So the sound quality is probably going to be even worse. So she'll do her best. My editor will do her best to try and kind of fix any issues like that. That's my general process. As I've kind of told you before, I'm trying to shoot these video first. YouTube is like my primary channel, and then Spotify. I know you use Spotify video as well, and then kind of Apple Podcasts. That doesn't mean that I should be ignoring the sound quality. I definitely need to be focusing on that. But video is a very important component for me.
And that's good to know. And I was going to mention as well, so these audits are primarily for audio podcasts. That's my expertise is in audio. I'm not a YouTuber, and YouTube podcast is this kind of weird gray area because it's not really YouTube and it's not really podcasts, but we'll get into that later on. So no, that's great to hear. So now we're going to delve a little bit deeper. What is your podcast niche?
My niche is helping people drink less alcohol to unlock their true potential. I stopped drinking 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, and it honestly completely changed my life. The reason why I stopped drinking was because I felt like I wasn't reaching my full potential, and I wanted to see what I was really capable of. And it was the unlock that I was looking for. And I was a grey zone drinker. I wasn't drinking a lot at all. I definitely wasn't sitting in the kind of addict or alcohol dependency category. I was maybe drinking a couple of drinks a week and then maybe having a binge every few months. But actually, it was enough to just take me off edge. And actually, just even giving up a small amount that I was drinking unlocked so much for me. And I'm really hoping to share that with the guests that I bring on and the stories that we tell.
Awesome. And it's good to know you. Yeah. I mean, not everyone has their niche. Often I ask that question and they're like, oh, I don't really know. But so that's great. You got your niche. So big question. What makes your podcast different and stand out than the other 250,000 podcasts that are published every week?
Wow, that is a hard question. And probably one that I've not really considered. I know that I'm trying to get my podcast to stand out against sobriety podcasts. And there is a lot of podcasts around sobriety, but when people talk about not drinking or drinking less or sobriety, it's all coming from like a place of addiction. It's coming from a place of like deprivation and it being a really painful, difficult journey. And that's why a lot of people don't consider it. I think as more information is coming out about the effects of alcohol, like long-term effects of alcohol, more and more grey zone drinkers, that we call them, are actually starting to reevaluate their relationship with alcohol. I'm trying for it not to be another preachy sobriety podcast and actually be something somewhere in the middle where anybody who is maybe just a little bit sober curious or looking to cut down a little bit or unlock a bit of their potential is, this is who we're kind of targeting on what we're doing. But standing out against the other hundreds of thousands, hard question.
It's a really difficult question, and I question myself as well. And it's really difficult to come up with the answer. But my biggest tip on this would be the only way to stand out, because podcasts are all kind of similar. A lot of them are interview podcasters. The medium is similar. The way to make it stand out is you. You are the thing that makes this podcast different to everyone else. And that can be really, really difficult to internalize and accept. And I'm still doing it. And it took me a long, long time as well to realize, oh, people listen to my podcast because of me. That's weird. And it's, as I said, it's taken me a while to accept that. But once you kind of do accept it and you grow into it, and I feel like I bring my personality even more to the podcast, which I probably always have, but didn't really think about it. That's what makes it different. And I've said this quote many times before, and I don't know if it's the exact quote, but my favorite comedian is Bill Hicks. And he said that if you're doing stand-up comedy, which I did, just be yourself, because there's only one of you. And once you be yourself, then you've got that market sewn up. And I often will listen to other podcasts and I'm like, oh, should I be more like this? Should I say this? Should I do this? And then I'm like, no, don't do it. Just be yourself. So it's really difficult to understand, but that would be my biggest advice. To make yourself stand out is just be you.
I love that. It's uncomfortable, but yeah, I love that. And I've definitely been on a journey this year of really trying to like myself more. And I think, when you start to put yourself out there more on these podcasts or any platform, you start creating content and talking more publicly, you have to feel really confident in who you are and really happy with like what you're trying to communicate. And that's definitely taken some self-discovery over the last year, but I'm getting there, I think. It kind of comes back trying to feel like rooted in that I'm a good person and I've got good intentions and might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I'm coming from an authentic place, and hopefully people can see that, right?
Yeah, for sure. And take the wins as well. I've been doing this for years, and even just yesterday, someone commented on one of my YouTube videos, because I've started putting my episodes on YouTube as well. And they come, I love your podcast. And I was like, wow, and screenshotted it, sent it to my wife. And I'm like, I still am amazed by that. I'm like, wait, what? You love this garbage that I record and put out and make stupid jokes on? And it's kind of like, I don't research very well sometimes for my other podcast and just say this nonsense. And I'm like, you like this? But then someone else told me last week as well, they're like, a similar thing. This was face to face. And he's like, I love your podcast. It's really authentic. And I was like, even all the mistakes I make. And he's like, yeah, you're honest. You don't know stuff, but it's kind of funny because you don't know the answer and you don't pretend that you do. I wanted to share with you about one of my favorite affiliate partners, and that is Fiverr. I've been using Fiverr for years for everything from ordering YouTube thumbnails to keyword research, writing podcast articles, even to Canva designs and thumbnails and more. So whether you're a budding entrepreneur, a podcaster, or anyone in between, Fiverr has got you covered. It really is the go-to platform if you want to find freelancers offering a massive range of services to help you on any project. Maybe you need a stunning new logo or just a short animation. Whatever you need, you can find it on Fiverr. What I love the most is how easy Fiverr makes it to connect with talented freelancers from around the world, all at prices that will fit whatever your budget is. Plus, with Fiverr's secure payment system, you can trust that your transactions are safe and secure. No dodgy people you meet on Facebook groups that disappear with your money and never give you what you want. What, that's only happened to me? As an affiliate partner, I will get a small commission if you use the link and at no extra cost to you. As an affiliate partner, I will get a small commission if you click my link and you buy something, all at no extra cost to you. And best of all, you will be directly supporting the making of this podcast that you're listening to for free, but it is not free to make. So why wait? Head over to somewhere that you've probably never been before. It's called the show notes. So whatever app you're listening in, if it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything at all, head to the show notes, click on my special link, and then you can browse thousands of gigs ready to help you with your next project.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's so nice. It's when you get that feedback. I met someone on Monday and they texted me afterwards saying, "You're really inspiring." And I was like, okay, I've never been called that before, but that's a really nice comment. Like, wow, thank you. I'll take that. That's cool.
Yeah, you got to remember that. Now, next question is, what is the goal of your podcast in terms of, so I'm not 100% sure on this. Do you have a business related to this, or is it a passion project? When I say what is the goal of your podcast, what do you want to get out of it?
So, nice question. That has changed over the last year. And as I've kind of got more into this journey, I come from a content marketing background, and I built social media for some of the world's biggest brands. And I thought I knew this. I thought I knew content creation, and I had these very kind of like lofty ideals that I was going to launch this YouTube channel, this podcast, and I was going to, within 3 months, I was going to be monetized. And I really honestly was very naive and thought this was all going to happen very quickly because I've done it for brands. And brand marketing and brand storytelling is very different from content creation and this type of storytelling. And so as I've got into it, I've been so humbled by the whole experience, and having to learn the equipment, how to script, how to talk to camera, how to source people. All of this has been the steepest learning curve that I genuinely just didn't expect. And what's kind of come out of it for me is, okay, yes, my views are still really low. I'm definitely not monetized. I don't have brand sponsors. So if anyone's listening and would like to sponsor my podcast, I'm very open to conversations. but actually, I am getting so much out of the conversations. I am learning publicly. I'm on this journey, both in my sobriety and also in ways in which I can unlock my potential. I'm getting so much value out of every single conversation, and I'm learning a lot about myself as we're going into this. And actually, that's become way more valuable to me than the monetization of it. And hopefully, the conversations that are coming out of it are becoming more and more authentic. And yeah, so for now, my goal is to keep this going, keep consistent. I'm trying to release episodes weekly and just enjoy the journey. Like, let it unfold how it's going to unfold. Let the whole podcast evolve and the topics and the conversations evolve, and just let myself enjoy that and learn kind of about it, I suppose, publicly. So yeah, that's for now, that's the goal. It's to let go of control, which is really hard.
I mean, in terms of like equipment, I'm still always adding pieces of equipment, always learning, and I've been doing it for so long. Like, I'm not an expert. I don't have a degree in sound engineering. I don't have 10 years of experience. I've just moved into video. So, I mean, you can't see right now, I've got different lights on me, which I don't even know if I'm doing it correctly. I was trying to record yesterday in my front room. It spent me an hour to set it all up, and then the camera didn't work and it didn't record half of it. These things happen. What I love though, it's so funny because when you say about monetization, that's the biggest thing I tell people when I'm coaching with them or working with them is don't try and if your goal is monetization, like you're setting yourself up for failure, like don't worry about monetization because there are so many other benefits. So like I've been doing my show, I've eaten and podcast for 5 years now. I barely made, I mean, it's cost me a fortune to make it over the years. Not, if I was to add up the time that it spent me as well, it would be, it'd make me tear inducing, but I don't do it for those reasons. And then with this show, Smarter Podcasting, I do it to support my business, which helps other podcasters. But even just recently, I've learned that what the biggest benefit I've gained from Smarter Podcasting is the people I meet and the connections that I've made that I would never have been able to do without having this podcast. So talking to yourself, I just interviewed last week. I don't know if you know Jordan Harbinger. He has like one of the top podcasters in the world. He has like millions of downloads. And he contacted me, or his team contacted me to be on my blog and be on my show. Talked to Adam Shively from Podcasting Business School, who's like a hero of mine. He's amazing. So just got to meet these amazing people that I would never have done. And so there can be different goals that come from your podcast, and it sounds like yours is evolving as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I would definitely say that networking because of the podcast has been unreal. I, this last year, set up my own marketing consultancy. I'm working with a drink startup as in marketing for them as well. But it's just opened up so many conversations and so many opportunities. And my network has just like flourished because of the podcast. And again, every new connection is introducing me to three more. And I've been blown away. And I've been blown away by the generosity of people and people that I don't know who are willing to share their networks or willing to connect or willing to share their stories and come on the podcast and come on a podcast that's relatively small and new. People have just been so great.
Yeah, people love being on a podcast. We all have an ego. We all want to be on a podcast for sure. Now, last question before we get into more of the audit. And I think this question is fairly self-evident, but what lessons or values do you want listeners to come away with at the end of each episode?
That, yeah, drinking less can really unlock your potential. And you don't have to drink, you know, that I think that's, I was very, like, I just believed, because every single person in my life drank or drinks. And I just believed that I needed to have alcohol to connect and have meaningful conversations, meaningful experiences. And for such a long time, I continued to drink, even though I didn't want to and I didn't like the effects of my body. I drank for other people and I drank for connection. And actually, there are so many things that you can do now, particularly around kind of the non-alcoholic alternatives. There are just some amazing drinks out there that give you that same feeling of connection without any of the negative effects of alcohol. And that's just one of the many things that we talk about on the podcast. But really, one small change could be like a massive unlock for you.
Nice. Yeah, I had when I was last in the UK, I had the Peroni 0% because I wasn't actually drinking at that time. And yeah, it was really the Peroni 0% is good. It's crazy when you go back to the UK. There's so many 0% alcohol drinks. Sadly, here in Vietnam, the only one is Heineken 0%, and it's not that easy to get, and it does not taste that great. So, not happening yet in Vietnam. I do like to drink alcohol. I'm just a big fan of it. But again, I'm similar to you, probably in that gray zone. Like I can go like quite a long time without drinking and things like that, but I do enjoy it. So as I said, I'm not auditing on the content, I'm auditing on the quality. But no, it was a good podcast. So let's get into it. So we already talked about you're primarily creating for YouTube and you have the video on Spotify, which is great. Video is 100% the future, but we're going to mostly talk about audio. The only thing I don't like about Spotify video, because I was doing it and I've removed my videos, is because I don't know if you know what dynamic content is, but dynamic content is when you add an ad or it's like an intro piece and it's separate to your main audio, so it's non-destructive, so it doesn't get added to the main episode. You can add it to the beginning, the middle, and the end, so the pre, the post, and the mid-roll. And what I add those little dynamic ads either for my own services or for my affiliates or just to do an announcement, because you can remove them and add them at any time, right? So they can be there for a week and then you remove them, and you can add them to your whole back catalog, right? So my back catalog is quite big, and most of my, like 50% or 60% of my weekly listens are from my back catalog. So it's a good way to be able to reach people. What I noticed was when I added video to Spotify and I watched it, the dynamic ads were removed. So it's just something to think about in the future. If you do want to add those dynamic ads and Spotify is your main player, for me, Apple Podcast is the main device that people use to listen when I look at my analytics. But I was like, I really want people to listen to the audio and listen to the dynamic ads. And so that's a big, big barrier. So just something to look out for in the future if you're doing Spotify video. But I do think Spotify video is pretty awesome. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Do you think they'll change that in the future?
I have no idea, but I bloody hope so. But it's one of these ones that I mentioned in the beginning, like video podcast is this weird gray area. And it's like Spotify is entering that gray area. Because what are you? Are you a video app or are you a audio app? For me, Spotify is 100% audio app. Like I put on music, I put on podcasts a lot, put it in my headphones, go to the gym. I'm not watching it. If I'm going to watch a video, I would go to YouTube. So it's kind of like, it's cool, but what are you doing, Spotify? I'm not 100% sure. You know what I mean? And I think those things are probably best kept separate. So I'll put my videos on YouTube and I just put audio on Spotify. but it is cool. Like I went to listen to your episode and then the video was there, which is super helpful because I can see if you're using a microphone or not and how you're using that microphone. Because I talked to somebody recently and I was like, oh, I'll give you some coaching on how to use the microphone. And they're like, what do you mean? Is it not really obvious? And I was like, you will not believe how many people I've coached where the microphone is like here and they're like, I don't understand why not getting good audio. And I'm like, because your microphone is not in front of your mouth. Just move it in front of your mouth and you'll get good audio.
Oh my God, I think I need that lesson.
Don't worry, we'll help. We'll go through it. Right. So let's get in. So you talked about having your editor do the hook at the beginning, and that was just amazing. As soon as I heard that, I was like, that is incredible. It's really good to take that. We do that as well. We didn't used to, but we'll take like 30 seconds, which is about similar to what you did, 2 or 3 clips to really get people, hook them in. And I know from getting into YouTube, what blows me away is YouTube tells you, and I don't know if you've seen this, if 50% of your viewers are still watching after 30 seconds, that's typical. Yeah, you've seen this, which blew me away. I was like, so you're expecting to lose 50% of your viewers in the first 30 seconds. That's how much you need to keep their attention, which is completely different to audio, because when someone puts on a podcast, they're putting it on because they want to listen to it. You don't really need to grab their attention so much, but I'd still do the hook for audio because I think it's great. So the hook was amazing. One thing that we do with the hook is we add captions at the bottom only for the hook, not for the whole episode, just again for visually, just to kind of really help grab people's attention. We add a couple of filters on the hook as well, so that when people are watching it, they know that this is not the main episode. So we kind of like distort it or whatever, do some cool animations, things like that, just so we're really just to help grab people's attention in the beginning. So you can look at doing things like that if you want. As I said, I'm not a YouTube editor, but that's something that we do. Now, I realized when I was editing or auditing this last night that it's so nitpicky, right? Like, and I'm one of those people, it's kind of like, do what I say, not what I do. Because if you probably went through my podcast, I don't do half of the things that I'm telling people to do, but it's because I'm listening to it with an analytical brain. So this one here, even when I wrote it down, I was like, Neil, you're just being so nitpicky. But right, here it is. You start off by saying, welcome back, right? Now, I personally don't say welcome back, and I don't advise people to do this. As one thing I've learned over the years is people come to your podcast at all different stages, right? We all love to think that people start on episode 1 and then they listen next week and the week after and the week after and the week after, right? I would do that for, like, I just finished a podcast called Hysterical, which is told in sequential order. So you need to listen to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A podcast like yours and like mine, people can start at any time they want. And I found myself, if I find a podcast I like, I'm going to just scroll through to find a guest that I know or a headline that I'm like, I want to listen to this. You're smiling because you know what I'm saying, right? And so I just feel like saying welcome back, right? This sounds really harsh, but I feel like it's alienating people who've come for the first time because it's so subconscious, right? And again, I'm being so nitpicky, but you're saying welcome back and they're like, I've never been here before. What do you mean welcome back? Am I the outsider? I'm not part of the crowd that listened to this. So it's just such a small thing. But I would just personally just say welcome to. That's what I normally say. If you think about how I started this introduction in my other podcast, I would just say welcome to the podcast instead of welcome back. Now, if you probably go back and listen to my podcast, I'll probably say welcome back all the time, and I've completely made myself look like an idiot. But that's just a small nitpicky point of view.
I'm like furiously making notes here, and I know I probably can watch this back afterwards, but I'm like, oh, I get it. And it's such a literal piece of feedback, and I've heard it before, not necessarily in relation to my own podcast, but when I've watched kind of best practices before, and it's like, yeah, I need to just make a tweak in that for sure.
It's so small. Just say welcome to instead of welcome back, and it probably makes the smallest difference. But I do like the Dave Brailsford, the marginal gains, right? Like the small things that we can do. So no, it was awesome. And then I loved it. Your introduction was absolutely amazing because that's one of the things I do audit for mostly is the introduction. You said the name of the podcast and what it does, which is perfect. I thought you could also add what value the podcast gives. So you say you're going to find out about the surprising joy and the profound impacts, but you don't actually say what those are. What is the surprising joy? What are the profound impacts that you're going to get from sobriety and from listening to this podcast and gaining sobriety. So I thought you could just mention to what someone is going to learn by the end of the podcast in general and by the end of this episode. And on the same vein, I thought what was missing was, and the question I asked you at the beginning is, exactly who is this podcast for? So is it for people who are already sober and they want to hear from other people who are sober? Is it for people who want to give up alcohol, but they're not really sure how to do it, or if they want to do it? Is it for alcoholics, which you've mentioned it's not, but it's not really clear. Is it for alcoholics, or is it just for someone who's looking for a lifestyle change? Now, what I did see when I looked on your Spotify, I saw it in your About section. It actually does say all of this. And your About section is pretty amazing. So I would just basically use what is in your About section. That pretty much should be your intro. And I would just say up front who the podcast is for and what value they will get out of it.
Awesome. Amazing feedback. Yeah.
No problem. Now, the next thing what you do, which is great, is you introduce yourself, which some people forget to introduce themselves, and I actually did it like a couple of weeks ago. I was listening back to the podcast, and I was like, I'm your host. Welcome to a Vietnam podcast. And then I was like, I didn't even say my name. So it sounds like a small thing to like introduce yourself. And when I do these audits, I did one a few weeks ago, and I was like, you didn't introduce yourself. You just said like, welcome to the podcast, blah, blah, blah. But it's really easy to forget. And you did it. You introduced who you were. So that was great. But you missed out one of the most important parts of the introduction. And you've done marketing, you know all about the hero's journey and things like this. You are the guide to the listener. You're the person that's going to guide the listener through the podcast. And so you need to tell the listeners why you are the guide, what qualifies you to be the person that's going to take them through this journey. Now, obviously, you're highly qualified. You're 2 years sobriety. It's something that you've done. You've noticed the changes. It's had a profound impact on your life. And you just missed that tiny bit out. You said, I'm Michelle Bryan. You could have just added one line. I've been sober for 2 years and I've seen the changes that it makes to my life. And this podcast, we want to help you make those changes too. And again, I looked in the About section, and you actually do that in the About section. You kind of introduce who you are and why you are the guide. So again, I would just use that About section, just kind of get it memorized a little bit or whatever. And you don't want to do it by rote, but just use the About section as your introduction, because you've clearly already thought about it and already done it.
Amazing. Yeah, very clear. I can start adding those in.
Now, the next person you introduced, obviously, was your guest, was Amanda. This here is just something that I learned from watching a YouTube video years ago and looking at how the late night show hosts like Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon, all those guys, how they introduced their guests. And I thought it was amazing. And I started using it. And as soon as I started using it, every guest that came on was like, oh, wow, that was amazing introduction. Like, it kind of startled them as how good the introduction was. What the late night host do, and now what I do is I just choose 3 things to introduce them. So your introduction was great, because sometimes people will spend like 5 minutes reading the resume of their guest and everything they've done and every award they've won. You didn't do any of that. So it was great. It was short, sharp, and it was to the point. But what the late night show hosts do is they'll say 3 things before they say the guest's name to build them up, and then they say their name. So the best example I can remember was, I think it was Jimmy Fallon, and he's like, my guest today is one of the top comedians in America. He's just launched a new tour, and he has a new Netflix special coming out next week. My guest today is Dave Chappelle. And then Dave Chappelle walks out, right? So it's such a small thing, but I just think that introduction, it works so well. People and the guests will love it. It really builds them up. And then I saw another video just recently about the introduction, which said the same thing, but it went one step further. And I've not started using this yet. It gave Joe Rogan as an example. It said you should either compliment your guest on 3 things, either how they look, which can be superficial, but not really, their energy, or their achievement. So you can just do that introduction. 1, 2, 3. My guest today is Dave Chappelle. Dave, love your energy. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Something like that. And again, it just kind of bigs the guest up and makes them feel really good. I've not started doing that yet, but I really love that advice. And your introduction, as I said, it was great. She was really, you could see she was happy with it. She was excited to get started talking about it. So, it was awesome. But that's just another little tip.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'd love that advice. And I'm a big complimenter, if that makes sense, when I meet people. So that comes quite naturally to me. So, and I like just putting yourself in that seat of the guest, you know, making them feel really good and really pumped for the conversation rather than making them feel like nervous and maybe like, so I've had some guests that I think got a bit imposter syndrome and felt like they shouldn't be there, especially when you're in that kind of podcast studio setting and there's lights and cameras and mics everywhere, and they're like, okay, I've not done this before. So yeah, I think really starting off on that note of why you deserve to be here in this seat, and I can feel that this is going to be a great conversation, I think is a great way to start.
Yeah, awesome. Now, we talked about what mic you do or don't use. You don't have a mic. You've got the Rhodes, though, so we can have a chat later on. I can help you get them set up. As I mentioned, the best thing is you want to be about a fist away from your microphone, which is where I'm at right now. I'm assuming if you have Rhodes, they're going to be dynamic microphones. So the worst thing you can do is get a condenser microphone, which is going to pick up the sound of the whole room. I'm not in a studio right now. I'm just at home, but the quality of the microphone should be really good. We'll see how it goes afterwards. Sometimes I record and I'm like, oh my God, it's not very good. But a dynamic microphone just picks up the sound right in front of it. So that's why if I move my head away to the side and keep talking, you're not going to hear me. So we can go through things like that. But just, I'm assuming if you have a Rode, there'll be dynamic microphones, which is really great. Now, so you obviously, the episode I watched, you used your laptop microphone, which you are never going to do again because the laptop microphone is the worst. And you had a thunderstorm, which you mentioned in the audio, but you actually couldn't hear it. So that was pretty cool. And I live in Vietnam and we have big thunderstorms as well. I often have construction happening right above me as well. I did an audit a few weeks ago where above me there was basically a pneumatic drill going off. But what I do is I use a program called Descript, and it's got a studio sound function. And I'm going to share with you right now, actually, I've already put it into Descript. So let me just open up the script. And hopefully you'll be able to hear it. I'm not 100% sure. If you can't hear it, don't worry. I'm going to edit it in afterwards. But Descript has a function called Studio Sound, which I don't know what your editor uses to edit, but we use Studio Sound. And it's not magic, like it's AI based, and it won't take terrible audio and make it sound amazing, but it will make good audio sound incredible. So I've got this pre-loaded. Let me see. Can you see my Descript screen?
All okay, right. Now Descript's up. Yeah.
All right. So I won this one, right? So you can hear right now what it sounds like without studio sound. And then I turn on studio sound, and your audio is not terrible, and it's going to take it from what it sounded like, quite echoey. It's your laptop microphone, to sounding like this, which is pretty much studio quality, which is pretty awesome.
Amazing. And so this is something that my video editor would do in post.
Yeah.
Exactly. Descript, is it a subscription-based service? Is it a free tool?
Yeah, it's a subscription-based service. So I'm not sure what they'll be using. When we work with clients, like we take on all the costs of this subscription and all of that stuff, and we just edit it for you. So I am an affiliate partner from Descript, so I will send you the link. And anyone listening, make sure you go check in the show notes. The link for Descript is there, so I can get a small commission, and it's no extra cost to you. All right, so we got that. Again, I'm not a video editor, but from a video point of view, and even right now, you're in a Starbucks and your lighting is amazing. Like I struggle so much with lighting, and you've just got full light on your face. You look amazing. You're same in your video that you did. I don't know what lighting you have. Like I've got 2 lights on me right now and it's still not good enough.
I had lighting. Yeah, I couldn't tell you what it is. I'll message you afterwards so you can add it in the show notes. But yes, I have got lighting at home. It knocks 10 years off me. So I'm closer to 40 than I would care to admit.
It is amazing. Like the lighting at home is great. I need to get some better lights. I don't really have very good ones. It does make a huge difference. So one of the things I was going to mention to you as well, I just read recently, is like nobody started perfect. And I love this for podcasting. You just always got to try and get 1% better. All the greats that you can ever think of, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, Simone Biles, like they didn't walk out the door one day and just do like a triple somersault, double pike. They didn't walk out the door and win a Super Bowl. It took them a lot of hard work, a lot of failure to get to where they are. And so I was like, that is amazing. And I live by that. If you go back to the beginning of Smarter Podcasting, I didn't want to get it started because I didn't have the lights, I didn't have the equipment, I didn't have a camera. And I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to do it. And if you go back, the episodes are just terrible quality. And it's so funny. The lighting is so bad. You can see the bags under my eyes. You can see like the big purpleness under my eyes and all of this. Now I'm using my iPhone, which is still not perfect, but it's like 1080p quality. I got some lights and it does take 10 years off you. Absolutely. So I was like, oh my God, I look so much better. So that's great that you've got the lighting. I thought the video again was great because it moved dynamically. So it changed from both of you talking to one of the speakers talking. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves is with video podcasts is the image just stays static for the whole time and it never changes. Who's going to watch a 60-minute podcast when the two people are just not moving? I think one of the things that we try and do for YouTube is always make it moving and dynamic. So that was great to see. Again, I won't get into that for too much because I'm not an expert. Now, I do look at your Spotify. I don't get into Apple Podcasts. I should, but I didn't. I just looked at your Spotify. Your artwork was great, but I have something funny to tell you that you're gonna laugh at this, right? If you go into your Spotify, it says Michelle O'Brien 3 times. So I'm going to put a picture up of it. It's called The Upward Spiral with Michelle O'Brien. And then right under it, it shows you the artist, which is Michelle O'Brien. And then on the artwork, it says The Upward Spiral with Michelle O'Brien. And if you go look on Spodcast, you see your name 3 times. That's fine if that's what you want, which I probably think you
cringe.
don't. I know, right? I know. And you don't notice these things till someone else points them out. The biggest thing, though, is it's all about real estate, as you will know from doing in marketing, right? You've got limited real estate on Spotify, and you've taken it up 3 times with your name. So just look at maybe changing the title even, because one of the things Adam Shibley that advises, and I advise people on this as well, is add a tagline. So you don't need to change the name of the podcast, just change it on the directories so it's more can be found easier and it's easier for people to see exactly what it's about. So for example, yours would be the Upward Spiral podcast. The other thing that Adam Shibley advises is don't use the word the in the first word and don't use the word podcast because again, it's real estate. You could just change the name actually to Upward Spiral because people know it's a podcast and the word the is pretty redundant. So you could just change it to Upward Spiral : helping you become sober or something like that. You know, happy, what did you call it? Joyful sobriety or happy sobriety, something like that. Anyway, takeaway with Michelle O'Brien because you've already got it on the artwork and you are already, if you go to your directory, you'll see that you're listed as the artist and then that's been pulled into Spotify. So if you need any specific advice on that, I can help you, but your name is there 3 times.
This is like the best thing ever. And I'm going to be like, you'll go in this afternoon, it'll all be changed. So
perfect. Please send me that.
You're not, somebody else said this week to me, I'm in like a little podcasters WhatsApp group here in Singapore, which I feel so honored to be part of. And they, you know, I was sharing some new artwork because I want to rebrand. So, and one of the guys in that said, get rid of the, and he sent me a clip from The Social Network where you know, one of the characters said to Mark Zuckerberg, get rid of the Facebook, you know, just Facebook. And so I was like, okay, it's definitely food for thought. And so it's great that you're saying that as well, because I was going to ask you that question. And the second thing is, I really don't like my branding. And this is something that I've just been doing myself in Canva. And I had a designer friend look at it last week. And I just said, I can't put my finger on what I want or what it's like, but something's just not working for me. And she told me it's because the whole thing feels very evangelical. You know, you're in these arches, you're looking up, it's the lighting shining down on your face. And only a designer could tell you this, like only, and now I can't unsee it. And I'm trying to fix it. So the podcast branding is going to change. And so I'm just kind of working on that. But this feedback is really aligned to that. And particularly the branding on YouTube as well. The YouTube thumbnail so important. And it's just, I'm not getting across what my podcast is about.
Awesome. That makes me feel good because I sometimes think I have no idea what I'm talking about. So things like this, I'm like, oh, no, I do know what I'm talking about. So that's good to hear. And one last thing, and I learned this from Mark Steadman, is that you want to always talk to one listener. And this I find is so difficult, but I've watched other YouTubers do it and I know other podcasters who do it, because podcasting is a one-on-one personal relationship, right? So very few people, there are some, but very few people are listening to a podcast with other people. They're generally listening to it on their own. And so you want to talk to that person directly. I really struggle with this, like how to change the wording sometimes, because it's just really natural that we want to say, oh, you listeners. And that was in the reason I'm making this point is because in your outro, you said all your listeners, to all of our listeners. And so natural. I do it as well. And even in the moment, I'm like, I don't know how to say this without saying it in that way. But I try and figure it out. Basically, when you figure it out, let me know. But just try and have it in your mind that there's one person listening to your podcast and you are talking to that one person directly, not all your listeners.
Yeah, I love that. And that's something really nice to keep in mind throughout the whole conversation as well. Yes, great. Thank you. Helpful.
And then very last thing on your outro, and I don't know if you do this for YouTube, because I'd heard great advice from YouTube, is you kind of to end your video abruptly because it helps with engagement. Because once you start to tell people that the video is finishing, they'll just click on to the next video and your engagement drops down, and that can have problems on your overall engagement. But it wasn't that you ended abruptly. The ending was great. But one thing you didn't do, though, was remind people to rate, review, subscribe, turn on notifications. And the biggest one now that everyone is doing, and I've started doing, is asking people to share it with other people. And that makes sense because word of mouth is still the number one way that people find podcasts. So you want to tell people, I do it all the time now, if you enjoyed this podcast and they want to learn more about podcasting, please share this with other people. So you just didn't have any of that. And I have struggled with that over the years because I just think it is pointless to be like, rate, review, learn, turn on notifications. But every single YouTuber does it. Every podcast does it. And recently I read an article that said, while we might think that it's kind of condescending or telling people something that they're already going to do, actually a huge majority of people do need that little reminder that they will forget to do it, and they need to hear it again and again and again until they eventually turn it on. So completely up to you if you want to do it. I didn't used to do it and I've kind of converted and now I do, but again, completely up to you. So that is the end of the audit. I hope that helped you a lot. I love doing these audits because honestly, I feel half the time I don't know what I'm talking about. Even when I'm doing the audit, as I told you at the beginning, I'm like, this seems so nitpicky and I don't even do half of this stuff, but I have been doing podcasting for long enough that I do know something. And so I hope that has helped you. And I'm excited to see the changes. You have to make sure you show me the changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny. As a marketer for so long, it's, I do the same. I'm like, I just put all my social content out, but I never look at it and critique it and think, oh, I need to change this and this and this. And then, so this has been so valuable. Thank you so much. We're going to have a conversation offline about my mics. And I hope that we can work together as well, because this has been really valuable.
Awesome. You are very welcome. So if you did like this episode, you know what to do. You've got to share it with somebody who also loves podcasts, who wants help making the podcast. Don't forget to turn on notifications, subscribe, like, follow, do all that stuff that I just talked about. And please send me a message if you want to get in touch. Go to the show notes. There's loads of good information there as well. Michelle, thank you so much for coming on to Smarter Podcasting, and thank you for tuning in. Cheers.
Hi, my name is Sal Jeffries. I run the Mindset, Mood and Movement podcasts. I've been working with Neil at 7 Million Bikes for the whole of this year, literally from the start of my podcast to date. And I want to say a couple of things. So when we record the podcast, sometimes there are things that I need tweaking. There could be edits or clips. It's really simple. I give those instructions to Neil, he gets it sorted. There's sometimes a sound level differences between the guest mic and mine. Again, that's all sorted so the outcome is a really balanced sound. And also if there are issues with voice, little kind of sound interruptions, all those things that can distract a listener, Neil knows exactly what to do, cleans it up. The end result, a highly professional, beautiful sounding podcast without distraction. That's exactly what I want. I know my listeners do. So if you're interested in having that level of podcast and that kind of quality, Neil is a great guy and I highly recommend you speak to him.